Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick unboxing and first look at the Panasonic LX100. This latest addition to the Lumix lineup of cameras is priced at $899, has a micro four thirds sensor rated at 12 megapixels, even though it's actually a 16 megapixel sensor. I'll get to that a little bit later. It does have a fixed lens, you can see right there, 24 to 75 millimeters in terms of focal range. That's a 35 mil equivalency, and then an f1.7 to 2.8 aperture range, a variable range. So very good, a very fast piece of glass combined with one of the largest sensors you will find on any point-and-shoot camera on the market. And then to boot, we do have 4K video capture. So let me go ahead and get this out of the box. And even though $899 may sound like a lot for a product like this, you have to keep in mind that right now the only other camera on the market that could shoot 4K video at under $1,000 was the FZ1000, the bridge camera, the sibling of this model that I have reviewed in the past. So first thing we see out of the box, some applicable paperwork as well as software talking about creating still images from 4K video, which is a great benefit of having 4 times the resolution of 1080p, which, by the way, if you do shoot in 1080p, this does capture at 60 frames for those of you that are wondering. Some accessories that are mentioned here because this does have a hot shoe. One thing I'm not in love with, I can tell you already before I get this out of the box, is that the flash is modular. Not that I would need to necessarily use the flash on this camera that often, but I would have preferred had Panasonic gone with a flash that was built in. After all, this is taking on the RX100 Mark III head-on, even though it is slightly larger and has far more features. Now, before I take the camera out, let me go ahead and show you what else is in the back, the actual package here. I expect to see a physical wall charger. Right there we have it. So we have an actual wall charger, something that Panasonic still stays true to. We also have a strap, which is no surprise. We also have that flash that I was mentioning before, right here, that attaches at the top. You can see we've also got the battery itself, which appears to be the same one used in previous models. So that's a good thing for those of you that already own Panasonic cameras. And then we have our transfer cable, right there, for image and video transfer. And that's pretty much it. Yep, that's pretty much it. A tie-on, I believe. And that is it. So let me go ahead and get the box out of the way. And let's get to the camera itself. Now, as I mentioned before, this is a little bit larger than what you may have come to expect from a point-and-shoot world, or at least a market where manufacturers are trying to remind us that a point-and-shoot still has a place. In fact, its form factor reminds me a lot of the Sony RX1. Now that is a full-frame camera, but very similar in terms of form factor, design, layout. You can see they have an exposure compensation dial up here, quick access to your ISO right there, which I do believe that low light performance here should be fairly good considering we're working with a micro four thirds sensor. You can see also right here we have the ability to change the actual aspect ratio, of the images that you're shooting. So whether you want a 3:2, 16:9, 1:1, or a 4:3, you have that capability, which is something I think a lot of people are going to love, and other people are going to scratch their heads at why it's even there. Panasonic has been working on dealing with the crop factor oriented with capturing 4K video off of sensors that are capable of doing so, and in this case, this is yet another example like the FZ1000 where in order to utilize 4K, some cropping is going to happen on sensor, and they really want to leverage as much of that sensor as they can. So part of that flavor, I'll say, that they've thrown into the camera world being, I would say, in many ways, I won't say revolutionary, but heading in the same direction that Sony is in trying to push the envelope and change the landscape, they decided why not take even more advantage of what we're doing with the sensor and give people control over aspect ratio. Of course, control of aperture right here, which when turned does make a clicking noise, which is not going to be great for those of you that want to shoot video with this, even though it does capture 4K. You, of course, have control over focus right here. This will not control zoom. For zoom, you're going to have to stick with the actual zoom rocker on the shutter button right here. And button layout is fairly simple. Build and construction quality feels good to me. You have a 3-inch display on the back side, 921K dot. So, I would say it's standard. It'll work well. Most are saying that both the EVF and the screen won't blow you away. And quite frankly, if that's one of the areas that Panasonic, I won't say had to cut corners, but make a compromise in order to make this palatable when it comes to pricing, because remember, this will end up on sale like everything else out there, then I think it was a good move. We have a control right there for your focus control. Also, this camera has Wi-Fi and NFC. I don't want to forget that. And you can see they're pointing out right here very plainly that you have a 4/3 sensor. So to remind you, it is larger than Sony's 1-inch sensor. But again, the build quality really reminds me of the RX1 in many, many ways. In terms of what you're going to get in a single charge on battery life, I can't give you an exact quote. I'll look right here and see if they have anything. But it looks like just reference to the fact that there's raw capturing and the fact that the EVF is XGA, as well as the fact that this is a very fast camera. I do want to point that out. Autofocus speed here is still very strong. 11 frames, continuous 6.5, or I should say 11 frames per second shooting, but 6.5 continuous with autofocus. So that's pretty good. 22 different creative option effects, and again, just reiterating the specs of the lens. 3.1x optical zoom, of course, optical image stabilization to complement this camera. So Panasonic really trying to redefine the most powerful small form factor point and shoot camera on the market. And then you even do have a hot shoe, of course, some microphones here. It'll be interesting to see what the onboard audio is like. No way to connect this, as far as I'm aware, to any audio in or out that I'm seeing on body. HDMI, USB connections right there. And then on the bottom we have our battery bay, also the SD card slot right there, and the actual tripod mount. And I do expect this to require high-speed SD cards for 4K video capture as well, much like the FZ1000 and GH4. And many are going to view this as a yet another way to get very similar video and still quality to what you'll find in the GH4. And in some ways, I'm sure it will be, but Panasonic, like every other manufacturer, has made sure to not exactly give away that sort of competency. They don't want to cannibalize their own market, but I do think this will make a great secondary camera, pocket camera. Obviously great competition for the RX100 Mark III, although considerably larger. I mean, for many, the fact that this is not a pocketable camera instantly renders it something they wouldn't consider when compared to the Mark III. But I overall, think that the feature set, price point, everything that it brings together is something that's going to make it a winner as time progresses. But overall, I like the offering out of the box. Excited to finally shoot with it. Of course, I will give all of you feedback on what I think of the performance, both in still and video competency, as well as low light capability. Last thing I want to point out was the megapixel mention. It is a 16 megapixel sensor, but for still capture, the highest quality is 12, and that has to do again with the entire approach that Panasonic has taken on this camera with using the sensor to the best of its abilities for different photographic situations. So that'll really depend, your megapixel count, again, on the aspect ratio you're shooting in. And then when it comes to video, those of you that are wondering, will you get the full 24 to 75? No, you'll probably start out at 26 and you'll actually get to go out a little bit farther. This camera does also have an intelligent zoom feature, a digital zoom feature, in other words, and the same Venus processor that powers the GH4 and the FZ1000. So very value-oriented despite its high price, and I think definite competent competition for the RX100 Mark III, even though it's not as small. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.